Your sister's future in-laws are people of real class. Don't come. We can't risk you embarrassing us. My mother sent that text at 4:18 on a Sunday. For 6 years she has paid her mortgage, buried my grandmother, and put my sister through a degree my sister never finished. With my money. Her neighbors think a stranger named M. Lassiter is the family's guardian angel. M. Lassiter is me. I read the text twice, then typed back one word. Okay. 3 days later, she called sobbing about a florist who would not take her check for $7,800. I let her finish. Then I said the only thing I had ever wanted to say. Mom, did you forget who's been paying him? She did not answer. If your shoulders tightened reading that, please like and subscribe. It helps the channel reach people who need this story. Drop your city and your local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. I'm Emerson Ashford, 34, and this is the story of the 6 years my mother spent my money to call me an embarrassment. Let's go back to that Sunday. My desk at Northbridge Capital sits on the 42nd floor of a glass building in Tribeca. On Sunday afternoons, I am the only one there. I like it that way. The radiators tick, the cleaning staff has left, and the windows look out on a slice of the Hudson that, in September, turns the color of a $5 bill. I read the text 3 more times. Each time the word embarrassing landed in the same place, like a coin in a slot. She had used the word before. August, last year. My sister Hannah got engaged. Spencer Endicott IV, of the Boston Endicotts, of Endicott Maritime, of the kind of family that has a side gate at Trinity Church. My mother threw a garden party in Greenwich. 80 people, white tents, a cellist. My mother stood on the stone patio with a champagne flute and announced that her only daughter was about to marry into one of the finest families in New England. I was not invited. A cousin texted me a photo of the cake. The placard at the front of the table said, Diane Whitlock and her daughter Hannah. Singular. I did not write back to the cousin. I did not write back to my mother. I logged into a portal nobody else in my family knows exists. A trust. 5 years and 9 months old. $250,000 in the principal. More in the supplemental accounts. The settlor and the sole trustee are listed on every page. Both names are the same. Emerson Ashford. Me. That August evening, after the garden party, I had moved a wire of $14,000 into the wedding budget subaccount. For the Vera Wang dress my sister wanted, my mother had asked. I had paid. I had not reacted. I had paid. Now, on this September Sunday, I sat at my desk and I did not react. I opened the laptop. The Greenwood Trust portal opens to a clean white screen with one line of navy text at the top. Marlowe and Stoddard LLP, Estate Council, Stamford. Below that is a number. $312,401 in the principal account. And below that is a list of pending transactions. The line I was looking for sat in the middle of the page. Pending wire. $185,000. Castle Hill Inn, venue. Tesoro Flowers, deposit. Russell Morin Catering, deposit. Initiated, August 22nd. Settlement, September 17th, 11 a.m. September 17th was Wednesday. 3 days from the Sunday I sat at my desk. I scrolled past the wire. Below it was the list of everything I had paid for my mother in the last 69 months. The mortgage on 12 Whippoorwill Lane, $290,160. The remainder of the MBA tuition Hannah had abandoned in 2023, $71,200. My grandmother's pancreatic cancer treatment at Stamford Hospital, finished in November 2022, $118,000. Smaller wires every month. Groceries for 2 people who never thanked the grocer. A new roof in 2021 that I had told my mother was the estate's contribution. $618,427. That is what my mother thinks an anonymous benefactor named M. Lassiter has spent on her since January 2020. That benefactor is me. I put my cursor on the wire line. There was a small icon next to it. A circular arrow. The label said reverse. I did not click. Not yet. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for an hour. I went home at midnight. I slept 4 hours. By 6 on Monday morning, I was back at my desk in the dark, with the laptop open again. I clicked reverse. The screen blinked. A pop-up asked if I was certain. I clicked yes. A confirmation screen appeared. Wire reversal initiated. Settlement will fail. Vendors will be notified within 1 business day. I emailed Jeffrey Marlowe. 6 words, please freeze all outflows from Greenwood. He replied at 6:14. Notice of suspension sent to Mrs. Whitlock per protocol. Per protocol meant a letter, sent priority, signed M. Lassiter, explaining that the Trust's anonymous benefactor was discontinuing all support effective immediately. My mother would receive it in 2 days. Tuesday morning, I knew she would not call. Wednesday morning, she would. My father died in November 2017 at the Mystic Seaport Museum. He was 48 days short of his 55th birthday. A boiler in a restoration warehouse had a copper line that nobody had pressure tested in 15 years. The line gave out. He was inside. The funeral was at St. Mark's in Mystic. The church was half full because it was a Tuesday, and most of the men he had taught to splice rope were still at sea. I sat in the back pew. My mother sat in the front. My sister Hannah was 20. After the service, my mother stood near the door and accepted condolences with the small, precise nods of a woman who knew the protocol. I stood 3 steps behind her. I heard her say, to my father's sister, who had flown in from Boise, "David never lifted us up, you know. He was happy at the seaport. Some men just are." My aunt looked at me. She did not say anything. That was the first time my mother used the word in front of family. Not the word embarrass, but its colder cousin. The implication that my father, and by extension I, had failed to rise. I drove back to Manhattan that night. I had a job interview the next morning at a firm called Northbridge Capital Partners. I wore a borrowed black blouse. I did not mention the funeral. I got the job. I started 2 weeks later. I also did something else. 2 weeks later. I went to the Connecticut Department of Vital Records and I changed my last name to my paternal grandmother's maiden name, Ashford. My mother received the certified copy in the mail. She never spoke about it. But the next Thanksgiving she introduced me to her cousin as Emerson, David's daughter. In April 2019, my mother called me at 1 in the morning. She had been crying for an hour before she dialed. A man on a Telegram channel had convinced her that a coin called Ocean Block was about to triple. She had moved every dollar of her retirement and most of the equity line on the Greenwich house into it. The coin did not triple. The coin did what those coins always do, $97,000, gone in 11 days. She did not say, "I am sorry I gambled the house." She said, "If your father were alive, he would never have allowed me to be in this position." I sent her $40,000 the next morning. I told her it was a one-time gift. I drove to Greenwich the following Saturday and sat with her at the kitchen table and walked her through the rest of the equity line, the mortgage, the timeline. She nodded. She blew her nose. She said, "Em, you are a good daughter." 2 weeks later, I overheard her on the phone with her cousin Ingrid. The cousin had asked how she had pulled out of the crypto disaster. My mother said, "I had a buffer. Your sister Linda would not have made it through. I am lucky I have always saved." She did not mention the 40,000. She did not mention me. I sat in her downstairs bathroom and looked at the floor tile for 19 minutes. I did not cry. I went back into the kitchen and I refilled my coffee, and I did not bring it up. That was the moment, looking back, when the structure formed in my head. Quiet help. Permanent erasure. A pattern I had not yet named. My grandmother, Marlene Ashford, lived in a one-bedroom apartment on Bedford Street in Stamford for 41 years. She had been my father's mother and the most clear-eyed person I have ever met. In April 2022, she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. My mother did not visit her. My mother said the smell of the hospital made her headaches return. I drove up from Manhattan every Saturday. I held my grandmother's hand while a kind oncologist named Dr. Halloran explained drugs, whose names my grandmother could not pronounce. The total bill, after Medicare, was $118,000. I wired it from the trust, and I told my grandmother it was from the estate. She knew it was not. She was a woman who had run her own bookstore for 30 years. She knew what an estate looks like. In late October, 2 weeks before she died, she squeezed my hand and said something I have not been able to put down since. "Emerson, you are the root of your father, not the root of your mother. Do not let her turn you into a shadow. Promise me." I promised her. She died on November 9th, 2022. My mother did not come to the funeral. She had a head cold. That weekend, in the parking lot of Bedford Street, I sat in my car and I changed the name of the trust. It had been a generic placeholder until then, account 7301-B. I logged into the portal and I renamed it Greenwood Trust, after the cottage my grandmother had owned in Maine, the cottage I had not visited since I was 9 years old. I think I had wanted my mother to ask someday where the name had come from. She never asked. 6 months ago, June 2025, my sister's bridal shower at the Boston Harbor Hotel, 80 guests, tea sandwiches and pastel ribbons. I was not invited. That afternoon, Hannah called me from a bathroom stall at the hotel. I could hear the hand dryer. She said, Mom wants me to ask you for $14,000 for the Vera Wang. Final fitting is Tuesday. They need the balance. I asked who was paying for the dress in the first place. Hannah said, Mom said it was from the estate. I sent her $14,000 that night. I sat on my couch and ate cold pad thai with a fork and watched a cooking show about a woman who restored a chateau in France. I did not cry. I did not call my mother. I did not say anything to my sister about who, in fact, was the estate. But somewhere in that hour between the fork and the chateau and the white blank face of my phone, a question opened up in me that I had not let myself ask before. How much is enough? I did not answer it. I closed the laptop and went to bed. If you've ever asked yourself that same question, how much is enough for a family that pretends you aren't there? Drop one word in the comments. Just one. Type enough. I read them. I want to know how many of you have been standing at the edge of the same pause I was standing at. The pause before the wire reverses. That pause is where this story turns. By Monday afternoon, I had reversed the wire. I had frozen the trust. The Tuesday letter, signed M. Lassiter, was already in transit to 12 Whippoorwill Lane. I was sitting at my desk at Northbridge when Priscilla Whelan, my executive assistant, knocked once and stepped in with a leather portfolio. Priscilla is 61 and used to run trade compliance for a maritime law firm. She has the kind of competence that makes a room go quiet when she enters it. "Newport packet," she said. "Endicott Maritime. Mr. Endicott has personally invited you to the rehearsal dinner Friday evening and to a private breakfast Sunday morning to finalize the $40 million debt structure for the new shipyard in Bath, Maine." I took the portfolio. I opened it on my desk. The invitation was printed on cream stock with a small navy E embossed in the corner. Castle Hill Inn, Friday, September 19th, 7 p.m. I read the names of the hosts. Mr. and Mrs. Edmund Endicott. The marriage of their son, Spencer Endicott IV, to Hannah Whitlock of Greenwich, Connecticut. I sat back. Edmund Endicott has been my client since the spring of 2021. We have closed 3 deals together. $87 million across the 3. I have eaten dinner with him at the Harvard Club. I have walked his dog. I have never told him my mother's last name. He has never asked. He had no idea that the Hannah Whitlock of Greenwich on the invitation was my sister. My mother, who had read this same invitation, had not connected Emerson Ashford, Strategic VP, Northbridge Capital, with the daughter she had told not to come. I picked up my phone and called Jeffrey Marlowe. Jeffrey answered on the second ring. He always answers on the second ring. He is 68 and has been my father's mother's attorney for 40 years and mine for the last 6. Emerson, the reversal is filed. Vendors will receive failure notices by 10 tomorrow morning. Jeffrey, yes. There is a wrinkle. I told him about the invitation. I told him about Edmund Endicott. I told him about the rehearsal dinner, 4 days away, at Castle Hill Inn in Newport, where my client and my mother would, for the first time in 4.5 years, occupy the same room. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, the silence on the line had a small, careful sound, like a man closing a folder. He said, "Are you going?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Bring me." I had not asked him to come. I had only described the geometry. He had drawn the line himself. "You'll need the binder," I said. "I will bring the binder. The pseudonymous correspondence as well. All of it. And the audio." He paused. He knew the audio. We had discussed it once in 2023. He had advised me then to keep it and not use it. He had advised me to put it in a sealed drive and forget where I put it. He said very quietly, "Emerson, is it time?" I looked out the window. The Hudson was the color of the same $5 bill it always was. I said, "Jeffrey, yes, it is time." He said, "I will see you in Newport at noon on Friday." I hung up. I closed the laptop. I sat in my chair until the cleaning staff came at 9. I went home to Tribeca that night. The apartment is a 1-bedroom on Reed Street with a view of nothing in particular. I keep it cold. I do not own a television. The kitchen counter is bare. In a drawer in my desk, I keep a small black USB drive with a white label. The label says, in my own handwriting, for Diane. I plug the drive into the laptop. There is one file on it. A voice memo. 53 seconds long. Recorded in my mother's kitchen, in Greenwich, on December 26th, 2022. The morning after the first Christmas without my grandmother. My mother is talking to her cousin Ingrid on speakerphone. I was washing a dish at the sink. Connecticut is a one-party consent state. I had pressed record on my phone when I heard the first sentence. I played it once, my mother's voice, exactly as it had been on the other side of the kitchen. "You know, Ing, this trust thing. It is a blessing, not a debt. Whoever the donor is, Lassiter, whatever. They understood something about this family. We were always meant to be carried." I let it play to the end. I closed the drawer. I went to bed. Wednesday morning, 7:32, my mother called. I let it ring 4 times. I picked up on the 5th. She did not say hello. She said, "The florist won't take my check. The florist needs $7,800 by noon today or they pull out and the wedding has no flowers. Can you wire it? Can you wire it right now?" I let the air sit in the room. I said, "Mom." She said, "Please, the flowers. The bride needs the flowers." I said, "Mom, did you forget?" She did not understand. I had heard her not understand for 34 years. She said, "Did I forget what?" I said, "Did you forget who has been paying the florist?" There was a long quiet on her end of the line. I counted. 11 seconds. She said, "What are you saying?" I said, "I am saying that you have been writing thank you notes to a man named M. Lassiter for 5 years. I am saying that the trust is mine. I am saying that I reversed the wire on Monday morning." She breathed out through her nose. The breath had the quality of a small animal that has just been startled in tall grass. She said, "Emerson, this is a joke that is not funny." I said, "Mom, I am sending you a link. Click it." I sent her the link to the Greenwood Trust portal. Read-only credentials. Her name in the upper right corner. Diane Whitlock, beneficiary. I hung up. I went to the conference room. I had a 10 o'clock with a board member from Endicott Maritime. I did not look at my phone for 2 hours. When I came out of the conference room at 12:11, my phone had 31 missed calls. 28 from my mother, 3 from my sister. I did not call back yet. I went to my desk. I drank a glass of water. Priscilla brought me a small plate of crackers and a small bowl of green olives. She did not ask. She knew the schedule of the wedding. She had read the same invitation I had. At 12:34, my mother called for the 29th time. I picked up. She did not start with a name. She started with the word Emerson. Her voice had a tremor I had never heard before. The tremor was new because she had spent 34 years removing tremors from her voice in public. She said, "Emerson, I am looking at a list. Of every wire. Of every check. With your name on every line. Emerson. Is this... Are you M. Lassiter?" I said, "I have been since January 2020. She said, "You have been carrying this house." I said, "Yes." She said, You did not tell me." I said, "Mom, I tried. In 2020. You told me, on Easter, that good families do not announce their generosity. You said the right hand should not know what the left hand is doing. So I did not announce it. I just kept the left hand moving." The line went quiet again. Then she did something I had not expected. She started to bargain. She said, "Emerson, you cannot stop the wire. The wedding is Saturday. There are 140 people. The Endicotts." I said, "Mom." She said, "What?" I said, "You have a choice. I come to Newport. Or I do not come to Newport. You decide." She did not answer for a long minute. Then she did something that, looking back, I should have predicted. She did not say yes. She did not say no. She said, "Are you threatening me?" There is a particular tone my mother uses when she is about to switch from prey to predator. I have heard it once a year, every year since I was 9. It begins with a small upward inflection on the second syllable of threatening. It is followed by a controlled inhale. And then, almost always, it is followed by a phrase that will, in 3 months' time, be repeated to a cousin as evidence of my cruelty. She said, "Are you threatening me, Emerson? You ungrateful." I said, "Mom." She said, "After everything I have done for you." I said, "Mom." I let the word sit. She stopped. She had heard in that single syllable that I was not going to negotiate the geometry of the room. I said, "I am not threatening you. I am giving you a choice. You can call Edmund Endicott right now and tell him that Hannah's older sister is in fact your other daughter, and that your other daughter has been paying for this wedding, and that your other daughter will be at the rehearsal dinner on Friday as a guest of the bride. You can do that. Or you can let me arrive at Friday without that conversation having happened, and the Endicotts will hear what they hear, when they hear it. Your choice. I am hanging up now." I hung up. 2 minutes later, my sister called. I let it ring 3 times. I picked up. Hannah said, Mom is sitting on the kitchen floor. She is shaking. She is saying the trust is yours. She is saying you have been paying for everything. I do not. What is happening? What is happening?" I said, "Hannah." She said, "What?" I said, "Come over tonight, to my apartment." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because for the first time in your life, I am going to tell you the truth without our mother in the room. 8 o'clock. Tribeca." I hung up. Hannah arrived at 8:11. She had taken the Acela down from Boston. She had not changed out of her shower tea dress, a pale pink linen thing with a ribbon at the waist. Her mascara was streaked from the train ride. She was 28 years old and she had never been to my apartment before. She stood in the doorway and looked around. There was not much to look at. The kitchen counter, the cold radiator, a single chair by the window. She said, "You live here." I said, "I live here." She said, "Mom said you had a roommate." I said, "I have not had a roommate since 2018. She came in. She sat on the chair by the window. I made her a cup of tea. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat on the floor. I said, I am going to say this once. You can ask questions after. She nodded. I said, since January 2020, I have paid Mom's mortgage. All of it. $290,000 over 5 years and 9 months. I paid for your MBA at Babson. $71,200. I paid for Grandma Marlene's hospital bills. $118,000. I paid for the new roof in 2021. I paid for the AC unit in 2023. I paid for the kitchen renovation in 2024. I paid your $14,000 Vera Wang dress in June. And I paid $185,000 toward the wedding venue, the florist, the catering, and the photographer. Until Monday morning. Monday morning, I reversed the wire. She did not speak for a long time. Then she said, that is not... Mom said the estate paid those things. I said, Hannah, there is no estate. She said, there is no estate. I said, there is me. There has only ever been me. She did not move for 10 minutes. She did not drink the tea. Then she opened her purse and took out her phone. She opened her banking app. She showed me the screen. $6,400 in checking, $1,100 in savings. She said, that is all I have. I said, I know. She said, how do you know? I said, because I have been the one filling the account behind it. You do not have an estate either. You have me. She started crying then. Not the tea and sympathy crying my mother does at family gatherings. The other crying, the one that comes out of the body the way water comes out of a kinked hose. She bent forward in the chair until her forehead almost touched her knees. I did not get up. I did not put a hand on her back. I let her cry. After a while, she sat up. Her face was the color of the radiator. She said, why didn't you tell me? I said, Mom did not allow me to tell you. She said, what does that mean? I said, it means that every time, for 5 years, that I sent a wire, Mom asked me to keep it quiet. Because, she said, you would not respect her if you knew where the money was coming from. She said, and I quote, that children need to believe their mother is the source. I believed her. I should not have. But I did. Hannah pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. She said, I did not finish the MBA. I told Mom I did. I did not. I left in the 3rd semester. The money you paid, Mom kept the last $20,000. She used it on the Lexus. I said, I know about the Lexus. She said, how? I said, I have the wire. She lowered her hands. We sat on the floor of the kitchen. The night moved past us in a slow window-shaped square. At one point, a siren went down Reed Street. Hannah flinched. I said, I do not blame you, Hannah. I want you to understand that. I have never blamed you. I have blamed Mom. And I have blamed myself for being so careful for so long that you grew up not knowing the price of anything that was given to you. She said, I am 28 years old. I should have known. I should have asked. I should have wondered why Grandma's medical bill never came to Mom, and Mom never wrote a check. I said, you were a child being raised inside a story, and the story was good. The story said that our family was old and had quietly always been wealthy in the right way, the discreet way, and that you and I had been gifted enough to live on the edge of that. I think you wanted the story to be true. Most people would have wanted the story to be true. She said, what do I do? I said, that depends on a question. She said, what question? I said, are you sure you want to marry into a family whose patriarch is, this evening, sitting in a study in Beacon Hill, looking at an invitation he wrote himself, in which he has called his only son's bride a Whitlock, and below which there is a list of finances that you and I both know is a lie? She did not answer that. She said, will you let me think? I said, yes. She said, tonight. I said, yes. I made up the couch for her. She slept for 6 hours. In the morning, she ate a banana standing up at the counter. She did not say much. She kissed me on the forehead when she left for the Acela. It was the first time she had kissed me on the forehead since we were children at the Mystic Seaport, on the boardwalk, when our father was alive. She said at the door, I need a day, maybe 2. I will text you Thursday night. I said, take the days. She left. I stood in the doorway and watched the elevator close. I did not cry then either, but I did notice, when I closed the door, that for the first time in 8 years, I had heard my sister speak my name the way our father used to speak it. Thursday morning, 8:51. My phone buzzed on the desk. The caller ID said E. Endicott. I picked up. Edmund Endicott has the kind of voice that sounds like a man who is leaning back in a leather chair while talking, even when he is standing in a hallway. He said, VP Ashford, I have a question. I said, sir. He said, forgive me. I have just received a phone call from my son. My son is upset. He is upset because he has been speaking to his fiancée, who is in turn upset about something to do with her family, specifically an older sister whom Hannah has, apparently, never previously discussed. I find this peculiar. I said nothing. He said, I do not like surprises at the rehearsal dinner, Emerson. I have had 2 surprises in my life. The first one cost me a freighter. The second one cost me a wife. I have made it a personal practice not to have a third. So I am going to ask you a question. And I am going to ask you to answer it directly. Are you in any way connected to the Whitlock side of tomorrow's wedding? I said, Mr. Endicott. He said, yes. I said, Hannah Whitlock is my younger sister. The line was quiet for, I think, 11 seconds. The same 11 seconds my mother had given me on Wednesday morning. He said finally, why did you not tell me? I said, because I have spent the last 6 years not being a Whitlock, sir. I have been an Ashford. The Endicotts hired Ashford. He laughed. Not a long laugh. A short one. A laugh of a man who has just understood a piece of architecture. He said, tell me everything, from the beginning. I have a coffee. I have an hour. I told him. The trust, the pseudonym, the mortgage, the cancer, the dress, the wire, the reversal, the Monday morning at 6 a.m., the M. Lassiter letter currently arriving at 12 Whippoorwill Lane, the Wednesday call about the florist, the voice memo in the drawer. He listened. He did not interrupt. When I was done, he did not say anything for a while. Then he said, Emerson. I said, sir. He said, my father, who founded this company in 1893, used to say something. He said, the best partner is the one who does not need to tell you they are a good partner. They simply behave as one, and over 30 years, you accumulate a body of evidence. 4.5 years ago, I signed a deal with a young woman who returned my emails at 6 on a Tuesday morning. I have never once needed to ask her where she comes from. That is a body of evidence. Do you understand? I said, I understand. He said, I am going to do something tomorrow night that I want you to be prepared for. I am going to introduce you, formally, to the room. I am going to do it before your mother has a chance to choose which version of you the room will meet. Are you willing to let me do that? I said, I am. He said, bring Jeffrey. I said, Jeffrey is already coming. He said, good. He paused. And Emerson. I said, sir. He said, when you walk in tomorrow, walk in the front door. Not the side door, not the staff door, not the back door from the parking lot. Walk in the front door of the Castle Hill Inn. Do you understand me? I said, yes, sir. He hung up. Thursday night, my mother called for the 8th time that day. I had not picked up any of the previous 7. This time I picked up. I do not know why. Her voice was different than it had been on Wednesday. Wednesday her voice had been the voice of a woman caught. Thursday it was the voice of a woman strategizing. I had heard this voice on the phone with insurance adjusters when I was 11. She said, sweetheart, I have been thinking all day. I said, yes. She said, I owe you an apology. I have not been a good mother to you. I have not been honest with myself about how much you have done for this family. I want to make this right. Come to the rehearsal dinner. Come as my older daughter. I will introduce you to the Endicotts. I will tell Hannah I am proud of both of you. I will say all of it. In front of everyone. I said nothing. She said, Em, are you there? I said, I am here, Mom. She said, will you come? I said, yes, Mom, I will come. She said, thank you, sweetheart. Thank you. Thank you. I knew. I knew you would not let your sister down. She started to cry. The cry was the cry of a woman who had just sold a difficult car. I did not say anything. I waited for the cry to end. When it ended, she said, I will see you tomorrow. Castle Hill Inn. 7 o'clock. Wear something simple. The Endicotts do not. They do not need much. Simple is best. Cream. Beige. Not white. White is the bride. I said, Mom. She said, yes, sweetheart. I said, Mom, I will wear what I want to wear. She paused. The pause was the smallest hairline crack in the strategy. She said, of course, sweetheart, of course you will. I hung up. I went to bed. I did not pack. I did not dream. Friday at noon, Jeffrey Marlowe and I and Priscilla Whelan landed at the Newport Airport in a private four-seater that one of Edmund's partners had sent. Jeffrey carried a leather binder 8 inches thick. Priscilla carried a small canvas bag. In the bag was a USB drive, a portable speaker, and a sealed envelope containing the original M. Lassiter letters my mother had thanked over the years. We checked into the Brenton Hotel, 3 miles from Castle Hill Inn, 2 hours before the rehearsal. I sat at the small desk in my room and unpacked the suitcase. I had brought 3 things: a dress, a pair of shoes, and a folded sheet of paper. The dress was navy, not cream, not beige. The shoes were black. The folded paper was a single sheet, printed at 6 that morning. On the sheet, in a clean sans serif, was a list. 6 lines. The lines summarized what I had paid my mother since January 2020. There was a subtotal at the bottom. $618,427. I folded the paper into a small rectangle. I put it inside the navy clutch I was going to carry. At 5:30, I stood in front of the mirror. I did not recognize the woman in the mirror. The woman in the mirror was a woman whose face had stopped negotiating. I said out loud to the room, I have nothing left to lose tonight. It was true, and it was not a lament. It was a release. Priscilla knocked on the door at 6. Jeffrey was waiting in the lobby. The car was downstairs. The car took us to Castle Hill Inn. We arrived at 6:28. Edmund Endicott had told me to walk in the front door. I walked in the front door. Jeffrey and Priscilla took the side entrance to wait in a small parlor off the main room, with the binder and the speaker. I stepped outside, on the lawn that runs down to the water, to take one breath before the room. The Atlantic was the color of cold steel. There was one other person on the lawn. My sister. Hannah was wearing the rehearsal dinner dress she had picked out a year ago. White silk, cream sash. Her hair was pinned up. She had been crying earlier. She was not crying now. She was holding a glass of something clear with no ice. She saw me. She walked over. She said, Em? I said, Hannah. She said, I made a decision. Tonight, after the dinner, I am going to tell Spencer the whole story, not the version Mom would tell. Mine. About the trust. About you. About the MBA. About the Lexus. About all of it. I said, Hannah, if you do that, you may not need me to do anything tonight. She shook her head. She said, Em, I want you to do what you came to do. I am not asking you to be quiet for me anymore. I am asking you to be loud for yourself. Finally. And I will tell Spencer separately. Tonight. 2 truths. Not one. I looked at her for a long moment. She had never spoken to me that way. Not in 28 years. She said, I need you in there. Walk in with me. She put her arm through mine. We walked toward the front door together. We walked into the great room at the Castle Hill Inn at 6:41. The room had high white walls and a long mahogany table set for 140. Candles, roses, the smell of butter and salt water and old furniture. My mother was standing at the head of the table. She was wearing a navy dress. She had told me, on the phone, not to wear navy. She had bought the same dress. She had her hand on the elbow of a tall, white-haired man whose photograph I knew from 4 years of board decks. Edmund Endicott. He saw us in the door. He stepped back from my mother's hand. He did not look at my mother. He looked at me. He took one step toward me, and then he raised his voice, very calmly, so that the room would settle. He said, "Everyone, before we sit down, I would like to introduce someone." The room turned. My mother's face. The face of my mother, when she has lost control of a room she had been counting on to be hers. I had seen this face once before, in 2014, at a country club brunch when she had been seated at the wrong table. I had not seen it since. She saw me. She saw Hannah's arm through mine. She saw Edmund step toward us, and she sat down, not gracefully, the way a chair sits down, hard. Edmund's voice carried the room without effort. He had been speaking to rooms since 1979. He said, "Friends, most of you know that tomorrow my son Spencer marries Hannah, and we are delighted to welcome her into the Endicott family. What few of you know, what, until yesterday afternoon, I myself did not know, is that Hannah has an older sister. Her name is Emerson Ashford. She is the strategic vice president at Northbridge Capital, our firm's primary partner since 2021. She is the closer of 3 deals totaling $87 million. She is the person responsible for the Bath shipyard expansion that some of you in this room are about to invest in." He paused. He said, "Emerson, please come forward." I walked. Hannah's arm slid out of mine as I crossed the room. I did not look at my mother. I stopped beside Edmund. I turned to face the table. He said, "Diane, Spencer, Hannah, Endicott family and friends. I have known Emerson for 4.5 years. I have eaten breakfast with her in 12 cities. I have entrusted my company's debt structure to her firm. I have signed contracts on the strength of her word. I would like to formally introduce her tonight as the sister of the bride in the room she belongs in." There was applause. It was the small, careful applause of 200 people who do not yet know what is happening, but who know that Edmund Endicott does not raise his voice in his own dining room without a reason. My mother did not applaud. She tried to smile. The smile did not reach the corner of her mouth. Edmund turned slightly toward her. He said, "Diane, do you have anything you would like to add before we sit down?" My mother's voice came out higher than her speaking voice. She said, "Edmund, there is a small matter of confusion about the family's finances. Greenwood Trust is a legacy from the late Mr. Whitlock, from my father-in-law. It has nothing to do with... It is an old structure. Emerson manages a portion of it as a courtesy." A door opened at the side of the room. Jeffrey Marlowe stepped in, carrying the binder. Edmund said, "Diane, I would like to introduce Jeffrey Marlowe. Mr. Marlowe is the attorney of record for the Greenwood Trust. He has practiced estate law in Connecticut for 42 years. He happens to be in town for the weekend." Jeffrey walked to the front of the room. He did not look at my mother. He looked at the room. He said, "Good evening. The Greenwood Trust was formed on January 8, 2020. The settler and sole trustee is Emerson Ashford. I have, in this binder, the original instrument of trust, the bank records of every wire since the date of formation, and the correspondence file. The correspondence file contains the letters that were sent quarterly to Mrs. Diane Whitlock in Greenwich, signed by a pseudonymous trustee, explaining her status as a beneficiary." He turned then to my mother. He said, "Mrs. Whitlock, would you like me to read aloud the letter you wrote to Mr. Lassiter on March 14th of this year? The one in which you thanked the trust for the wedding contribution. My mother went the color of the candles. She did not answer. Jeffrey opened the binder. She said very quietly, "No, please." He closed the binder. He said, "Then I think the room understands the structure of this trust." Spencer Endicott IV had been sitting at the head of the table near his father. He stood up now. He turned to Hannah. He said, "Hannah, did you know about this?" Hannah was still standing where I had left her, near the door. She walked very slowly to her place at the table. She picked up the place card with her name on it. She looked at it for a moment. Then she set it down. She said, "Spencer, I am going to answer your question, but I am going to ask the room to allow me a sentence first." She turned to my mother. She said, "Mom, I learned about the trust on Wednesday afternoon. I learned the full extent of it on Wednesday night, in my sister's kitchen, sitting on the floor. Until then, I believed the story you had been telling me about the estate. I want you, in this room, in front of these people, to tell me, out loud, why you let me believe it." My mother's eyes did not move from the white tablecloth in front of her. She said nothing. Hannah waited. She said, "Mom, I am asking you." My mother said, I wanted you to feel taken care of. I wanted you to feel." Hannah said, "By whom?" My mother did not answer. Hannah turned back to Spencer. She said, "I learned about the trust on Wednesday. I did not know how to tell you. I was planning to tell you tonight after the rehearsal. I am sorry the room is hearing this first. I am not sorry that the room is hearing it." Spencer did not move. Edmund Endicott put one hand on his son's shoulder. He did not say anything. He just stood there. My mother turned to me then. The only person in the room who, for a moment, she still thought she could win. She said, "Emerson, you came here tonight to humiliate me, in front of these people, after everything I have done for you." I let the sentence finish. I let it sit on the table in front of her for the count of 3. I said, "Mom." She said, "What?" I said, "I did not come here to humiliate you. I came here because Edmund Endicott invited me 4 months ago, and the invitation arrived in your mailbox 6 weeks ago, and you read it and did not see that the woman named Emerson Ashford on the invitation was your daughter. I did not come here to humiliate you. I came here because I have stopped hiding the fact that I am, in this house, the person paying. You are welcome to keep all of the dignity you have. I am not taking it. I am only refusing finally to lend you mine." Priscilla Whelan stepped forward from the wall by the doorway with the portable speaker. I said, "Mom, there is one more thing the room is going to hear. Not because I want them to hear it, because I think you need to." I nodded to Priscilla. She pressed play. My mother's voice from December 26, 2022 filled the room. "You know, Ing, this trust thing, it is a blessing. A blessing, not a debt. Whoever the donor is, Lassiter, whatever, they understood something about this family. We were always meant to be carried." The room was completely silent. I counted 11 seconds. I had counted 11 seconds twice that week. My mother did not cry. She sat down. Not in a chair this time. Onto the chair. The chair did not move. The room around her, however, moved. Every guest, very slightly, leaned away. Edmund Endicott stepped forward into the silence. He spoke softly, but the softness carried. He said, "Friends, the dinner tonight will continue. The dinner tonight is for you. Many of you have flown in from across the country and from beyond, and we will not waste your evening. I would, however, like to make a small announcement. The wedding ceremony scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock has been postponed indefinitely. Spencer and Hannah have not made a decision about their future together. They will need time. They are entitled to it." He paused. He said, "Diane, Whitlock family, the Brenton has rooms still available. I have asked the front desk to arrange transport. You are welcome to stay for dinner if you wish. But after this evening, I would ask that no further communication be initiated between the Whitlock family and the Endicott family until Spencer and Hannah themselves indicate otherwise. He looked at my mother. He said, "Diane, I am sorry, I take no pleasure in this." My mother stood up. She did not look at Edmund. She did not look at Hannah. She did not look at me. She walked the length of the table to the door. Her cousin Ingrid followed her, carrying her purse. I sat down at the place card that read Emerson Ashford. It was set 2 seats from Edmund, the seat that, 4 months ago, had been set for me, by name, by Edmund, before any of them knew that I was Hannah's sister. I had spent 6 years in the corner of a room. For the first time in those 6 years, no one in any room I was about to enter would call me the other one. I picked up the napkin. I set it on my lap. I ate the dinner. It was nearly midnight when I stepped out onto the lawn at the edge of the water. The Atlantic was black. There was a tug horn somewhere out on the channel. Hannah came out a minute later. She stood beside me. She did not hold my arm this time. We just stood. After a while she said, "I'm not getting married tomorrow." I said, "I know." She said, "I do not know if Spencer and I are going to make it. But I know I am not getting married tomorrow. I am not getting married for a year. Maybe longer. I have to figure out how to live without Mom's story." I said, "I will help." She said, "Em." I said, "Yes." She said, "I want a job. Not from Mom. Not from her cousins. From you." I said, "You have one." She turned. She looked at me. She said, "What?" I said, "There is an opening on Priscilla's team at Northbridge, office coordinator, starting salary $58,000, 3 weeks paid leave. You start with the bottom rung, you earn the next one. I will give you the interview. I will not give you the job. You will." She did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Why?" I said, "Because Grandma Marlene told me, in November of 2022, in a hospital room in Stamford, that I am the root of our father, and not the root of our mother. The same is true of you, Hannah. You have just been farther from the root. I am going to give you the chance to walk back to it. You will decide what to do with the chance." She started to cry then, quietly, standing up, facing the dark water. I did not put a hand on her shoulder. I waited. Saturday morning, the Brenton lobby. I sat across from Edmund Endicott. We had ordered coffee. He had ordered toast. I had ordered nothing. He set down his cup. He said, "Emerson, I would like to invite you to join the board of the Endicott Charitable Foundation. The seat I am offering you was held, until 30 years ago, by my father. My father held it from 1948 until 1995. I retired him from the seat on his 80th birthday. The seat has been empty since." I did not speak. He said, "This is not a compensation. I do not, in my company, compensate people in this way. This is a recognition. I am late to it. I am offering it not because of what happened in this hotel last night, but because of 4.5 years of evidence that I should have offered it sooner." I said, "I will accept." He said, "Good." He drank his coffee. He looked at me. He said, "Your mother is still in Greenwich." I said, "Yes." He said, "What happens next?" I said, "Next month, the lender will receive its notice. Without the trust, the mortgage will not be paid. The lender will move within 90 days. By March, the house will not be hers. She will not be homeless. She has equity. She has my father's pension. She has her own dignity, which is the part of her that she has never spent. She will move into a rental apartment in Stamford. That is her choice to make." He nodded. He said, "And you?" I said, "I will not be in that apartment with her." He nodded again. "If you are watching this and you are still paying for a family that has not said your name out loud in 5 years, you do not have to wait for a rehearsal dinner. You do not have to wait for an Edmund. You can stop today." The line in this story that mattered was not the line my mother forgot. It was the line I finally said. "Mom, did you forget?" That is the line. It is yours too. 6 months after the dinner at Castle Hill Inn, the house on Whippoorwill Lane went to auction on a clear Tuesday in March. The auctioneer was a woman in a green coat. She sold the house to a young couple from Stamford for $1,190,000. The mortgage was paid, the equity was distributed, and my mother moved into a one-bedroom apartment on Hope Street in Stamford. She did not call me about the move. Ingrid called me. I sent a card. Hannah started at Northbridge Capital on October 6th. She was Priscilla's office coordinator for 10 weeks. Then Priscilla promoted her to associate coordinator. She earns $58,000 a year, plus a small bonus. She rents a studio in Cambridge. She pays her own rent. She has not borrowed $1. Spencer Endicott IV and Hannah ended their engagement formally in November. There was no bitterness. There was no Instagram post. He sent her a kind letter. She sent one back. They wished each other clear paths and meant it. I joined the Endicott Charitable Foundation Board on October 15th. The seat that had once belonged to Edmund's father is now mine. I sit through 3 meetings a year. I direct a scholarship in the name of my grandmother, Marlene Ashford. The scholarship funds children of marine engineers at Mystic Seaport. My father's name appears on the dedication plaque. The Greenwood Trust still exists. It pays out 1 wire a month. The wire goes to a small fund in my grandmother's name. The wire pays for a yearly visit from a hospice nurse for elderly residents of Bedford Street in Stamford. The first recipient, last winter, was an 86-year-old woman my grandmother had known as a young teacher. The woman did not know who paid. The woman, like my mother, believes a benefactor named M. Lassiter has been kind to her. That part of the structure I have kept. I sent an email to Hannah on a Sunday afternoon in May. The email had 1 paragraph. Hannah, the 24-month silence with Mom is still in place. Nothing has changed there. With you, however, nothing is silent. See you Monday at the office. She wrote back, M. Monday. Mom has not asked. She still has not asked. I think, looking back, that she did not forget. I think she had never bothered to know enough to be able to remember.